I think it's really important that we're all a little bit scientific about this, clinicians included. Just as you say, just where are we getting our information from and who is giving it? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some well-known figures who do endorse certain things, and there probably is some credibility behind it. But what is this person's area of expertise? And sometimes the area of expertise of the person is what they're famous for, as opposed to, are they really looking at this scientifically?
You're listening to the Active Mom Podcast with host Dr. Carrie Pagliano. I'm a mom, physical therapist, and your go-to guide for staying active with pelvic health issues in pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and beyond. Whether you're a fellow mom, physical therapist, or women's health professional, join me where I'll share expert insights, real-life stories, and the latest research to help you approach running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, or whatever activity you love with confidence and evidence-informed guidance. Let's start the show. All right, so I found our next guest on a blog post from Tom Goom, and to have him, post about menopause, I was super excited, and so reached out to Claire Callaghan, who's a physio over in the UK, and reached out and said, "Can we have a conversation about menopause?" And she said, "Of course." So, Claire, thank you for joining me on the Active Mom Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us, if people aren't familiar with you, who you are, kind of what you do, and how you sort of fell into having a conversation with Tom about menopause and running.
Right. So, so I have been working as a child physio for about 25 years. I started my career in Australia, graduated over there, which is where I'm from Brisbane originally, and then came to the UK for a couple of years, worked here, went back, came back with my husband. So been here about 20 odd years and doing lots in the sport and exercise field, and did my master's in sport and exercise physio, finishing that in 2011. And my research, I looked at lots of different areas for potential research when I was doing that. But the area of research I focused on actually was looking at women coming back to physical activity after having had a baby. And as you can imagine, back in between 2006 and 2011, when I was sort of studying on this, there wasn't anything.
No.
Nothing. So it started with a very qualitative piece of research, which went well. And through that, I really became very interested in looking at women and sport and exercise and what happens at various stages of life, where from teenage years through midlife, through to the middle of life and beyond. Because, of course, women want to stay active at every stage. And then as I've got older, obviously I'm interested in the stage that I'm at. So as I moved through my 40s, I did a little bit more research around the perimenopause space, and again found that there wasn't as much good research as we might want. However, I've always been into running. Did Tom's running repairs course, which I'd give a major shout out for because that was absolutely brilliant. I did it in person, which was great because I got to know Tom. And a little while later, he approached me and he said, because he knew I had this special area of interest around women's physical health, well-being, performance, and sort of various stages. So he said, would I be interested in writing a blog for him? And I said, absolutely, because I do quite a bit of writing anyway. And, we put together a blog. I put the bones of it and most of it together, and I just couldn't believe how many people seemed to like it. So I think because there wasn't much out there, there really isn't much out there. Luckily, there's more emerging now. The conversation has moved on, but there's still a long way to go. So that's how I got into that. Yeah.
No, I love it. And when I kind of was sort of reading your backstory, I found a lot of parallels in kind of our professional journeys and stories and that sort of thing. We're kind of the same vintage and, been doing this the same amount of time. Just going back, I mean, the parallels that I'm seeing about kind of how we had to navigate being active in pregnancy and postpartum, I feel like we're doing that all over again in perimenopause and menopause. What parallels are you seeing? And then where are you seeing that we kind of have to step aside and follow some new pathways?
Yeah. So thinking about that very generally, the parallel is that I found is when I did my research, I interviewed women basically around coming back to physical activity post-baby. And what I looked at were needs and barriers. So the needs of women, what do they need to enable them to be active or be more active than they were, or maintain or improve activity? And what were the things they found quite difficult and were barriers to that? And what I found in that was that women wanted education, they wanted credible facts, they felt they were being sold a lot of things, and they wanted to sift their way through that to get through to the credible material. And also because they're bombarded with so much information,
Right.
like what's real, what do I need to know, and where do I get this information from, and how do I access the healthcare professionals that can help me do that, and the exercise professionals that can help me do that. And so the parallel that I really see in this perimenopause space is, once again, women are hit with lots of different messages, some very credible, some perhaps less so, a lot of societal pressures as well.
Yep.
And actually what they want is they want the facts,
Right.
am I going to be, am I going to have this affecting me physically or not? Are these aches and pains that I'm getting, are they related, or am I becoming more injury prone? Is it related to that or not? And what can I do about it? That's what they want to know. So it's very similar in that regard, I'd say. So same things that women are facing, really.
No, I think I mean, the other parallel that I find really challenging, and I was kind of thinking about this the other day, was I think when I entered the pregnancy postpartum space myself, I had this understanding, or this assumption, I guess, that things had already been established. And now I understand that no, it was like, we're literally, I mean, what was it? The BJSM just came out yesterday, the whole, postpartum one with the Canadian guidelines and all of that. And I mean, we're 25 years into our career, 25, 26 years. And this is just, groundbreaking stuff that's being put in print. Yes, we've been treating this population for a long time, and now we're finally getting some data. Same thing with perimenopause. Okay. Ideally, women have been doing this a long time. Women have been active in this period for a long time. Where's the data? It's just not there.
I understand completely, and I agree that the data just isn't there, and we all know how easy it is to do it's not, no study is easy, but it's easier to recruit 21-year-old boys in the army, isn't it?
Right.
Than to do a study on pregnant women or women where hormones may change. You've got too many variables, makes it hard. Therefore, there's less studies, I think. And we all know about the gender disparity around, research in women. Right. So I think we're on the major catch up.
I think so too. Yeah. And most of the stuff that I have found, so I went on a deep dive the other day looking, I'm sure you've seen the weighted vests online. Everybody's all about wearing the weighted vests. And just to see what papers are out there. And I pulled 3 to start, and they were all menopause or postmenopausal. And so I think the assumption is, we did this in pregnancy postpartum, you extrapolate from what is out there. I mean, basically that's what the 2019 return to run guidelines were for postpartum. It was let's extrapolate from what's out there, give it some place to start, and then go from there. But it's interesting, the twists that kind of come in social media where people are like, yes, do this and it will do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I think we're hoping it does X, Y, and Z, but we don't know that yet. And I feel like that's a nuance that's missing. And I don't think we had that to contend with in the early 2000s, or even in the early 2010s, because we didn't have social media to contend with. I mean, what are your thoughts about that added aspect to this, to the, the pressure and people saying, hey, this is what works, definitely do this type of exercise, do this if you're, eat this now. What are your thoughts?
Oh, that's so true, because, well, first of all, fascinating that the weighted jackets thing has come up in the States, because I've had it, last week I did a strengthening in perimenopause masterclass, and it came up as a question in that, and it's all over social media here too. Yeah. So fascinating. So again, global trends, so things that are coming up globally. Secondly, with social media, there's just not that fact check, is there? So even if you've got an article in women's health magazines, for example, there's still a credibility threshold that they have to meet or would be expected to meet. And if they didn't meet, people would be asking the questions. So I think it's really important that we're all a little bit scientific about this, clinicians included. Just as you say, just where are we getting our information from and who is giving it? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some well-known figures who do endorse certain things, and there probably is some credibility behind it. But what is this person's area of expertise? And sometimes the area of expertise of the person is what they're famous for, as opposed to, are they really looking at this scientifically?
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be mindful of that when we're making decisions about our bodies and about where we're getting our information from. It's an issue here for sure. And I know that a lot of dietitians, nutritionists, psychologists are also in the same space of having this. And I think we all just need to keep beating the drum of like what we know. And as you're saying, you're reading the articles, you're looking at the BJSM, you're getting your information from these type of sources.
Right.
And the evidence.
No, I feel like it's a really hard line to walk, because on one hand, I feel like private sector sort of pushes innovation and gets us to think about things differently.
Absolutely.
And on the other hand, we've got researchers saying, well, what they're saying isn't exactly true. And I feel like they need each other because one's going to balance out the other. But I feel like we're able to do that being in this space, being like, yes, we know there's not a paper specifically on this, but we've done some extrapolations and we can try this and it's better than doing nothing. But the average person, I feel like, well,
really?
The influencers like do this. And then the research person you're trying to do the right thing is saying, no, they're wrong. That doesn't work. And you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Nothing. And yet still whatever problem we're having or like not being able to do this or that, just sort of, it's still there.
And I think that's where the role of people like yourself come in as podcasters and people like me who are writing blogs about this stuff. It's our job to sort of break that down. But equally, maybe, don't have necessarily the thousands or millions of followers to get those messages out. So sometimes, you can see why people would line up.
Of course.
Who has a voice, who has an influence. So as you say, there's a balance and they can hopefully gently nudge each other in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about running specifically because a trend that I saw, I think there was a generation of moms who ran kind of before our generation, and they didn't have the benefit of knowing to strength train simultaneously. They just ran and ran and ran until they couldn't run anymore. And now they're hitting that menopause time period. They've done nothing other than running and they're calling it. And they're saying, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore because my joints are giving. I'm going to do gravel bike racing or something because it's more gentle. I feel like they kind of missed out on, the good stuff that we're learning about strength training and kind of bone health and, cross training and all of that. Is that something that you're kind of seeing as well? Like there's some generational differences?
Definitely. I think women who are currently in their 40s and 50s have, a lot of us, because of time factors or exposure or what they like, have tended to do a sport or running and just done that. And maybe they've sort of thought they got away with that because, but then of course, when your body is getting a bit older, when you haven't got that estrogen on tap to sort of help sort things out, then things, things can be problematic. So yes, I'm definitely seeing that. And I'm all about telling people to strength train, really, but also finding practical solutions within that, because a lot of people's idea as well is, strength training, that means I have to go and join a really expensive gym and lift heavy stuff, and I don't think I can do that. So and so what I'm trying to do clinically, and I think a lot of other physios are doing this as well, I'm sure you are as well, is meeting people where they're at. So finding out what their priorities are and where their level of strength is, and giving them some strength work in accordance with that level.
Yeah.
And that can be anyone from someone who's got a disability and is relatively sedentary all the way through to your ex-Olympic athlete. Like there is something in that for everybody. And it's meeting people where they're at and having different solutions, whether they're doing exercise at home in a quick 10 minutes, or are they going to the gym for an hour and a half and lifting really heavy? And everything in between.
Yeah. I think you bring up a really good point that does parallel kind of what you were saying earlier about, hey, what are the barriers to getting started? You were saying in postpartum, that's very much, I think, what we're talking about here is like, what are the barriers? Where do you figure out how to start somebody? So if you have a woman that comes to you, historically, all she ever did was run, even in postpartum, all she ever did was run. Let's say she's got like older teenagers and says, hey, I'm going through this transition here. I'm being told to strength train. I don't know what that means. I'm told I need to do resistance work. Like, where's a good place to start? And then how do you sort of spell out that journey forward for them?
Sure. So you've just described something that I see very commonly. I tend to delve a little bit more into the subjective analysis first. So find out a little bit more about where their injuries are, of course, if they've had any injury history. Find out a little bit about their birth history as well, whether they had C-sections, did they have any diastasis, pelvic issues, have they had any pelvic floor tearing, episiotomies, all of that. So I try and lay the foundation first by getting the nitty gritty of that, and where they're at with all of that right now. And then once we've established that, looking at them more generally, making sure that they understand that there are a few real basics that you need to cover with strengthening and perimenopause. And from my perspective, I've broken this down into, 4 key areas. And if we're talking purely strengthening here, I'm not talking about, obviously you need to do cardiovascular exercise and balance work and so on. But the key areas are doing your weight-bearing strengthening for your bones, your resisted work, some form of resistance, some form of pelvic floor control, strengthening and being able to relax it. And then thinking about their posture, staying strong and centered in their balance and coordination. So they're the 4 key areas that any sort of strength programming for a perimenopausal woman really needs to tick off. So we'll go through each of those. And so I'll also make the point that we need to think about arms, legs, middle, the lot of it. Because
even runners,
because if you've done running, your legs are probably half decent in terms of strengthening, but your upper body may not be. And of course, we all know that perimenopausal women, we can lose range in the shoulder. You can get those frozen adhesive capsulitis type issues. We just want to avoid all that. So, so that's where I tend to start. And then I ask them, would you prefer to use bands or weights? Do you have any preferences? What have you got at home? Are you a member of a gym, or do you like going to classes? Trying to get a feel for what they like, because it's no point me saying, oh, well, water's a great form of resistance, go swimming, if they hate swimming. Or if they've got wrist issues, holding a weight might be difficult. So I try and get on top of what they might want. And we tend to start lower and slower, but there's definitely a need to progress to lifting heavy ultimately. That's where we're going. It's got to be hard, and you've got to get to the point at the end of your reps thinking, I might have a couple of reps left, but not much more. It needs to be hard and heavy ultimately. But if I get into that too early, with some people, they get scared off. And their joints might not take it. So it's just about meeting them where they're at, but progressing them as quickly as we can to lifting heavier in the areas that they can tolerate.
No, I think you bring so many good points up there of like, starting with that basic understanding of what past injuries are they walking in with, birth history, all of that, because that might have been a reason why women never sought that particular activity because maybe they still have leakage with certain things, or, the word they were told, you can't lift because it's bad for prolapse. And, we know now that, I mean, they have these old wives, well, not old wives' tales, but things that we were very much taught back when we had kids, and they didn't realize that things got updated. The other thing that you said that I thought was so poignant was just, again, like, figure out kind of what that entry level looks like for them. Because I don't know about you, but like, there's this, what we're being told we should do. And then, like, if we start with doing everything all the time, you're not going to stay consistent with it. It's really finding that thing that you love to do that's going to allow you to just build that habit. And then you really start to like it. And then you can kind of progress up from there. Exactly. But like, I see so many people, it's like a New Year's resolution that they try and start, I'm going to exercise 5 days a week. And the one day that they miss, then all of a sudden it's over and done,
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it is overcoming, as you say, some of those things. Like, so I've had women through who all they've done is run, but they had a bit of a diastasis when they're pregnant. It's actually gone, long gone. But they were told, don't do abdominal crunches, don't do sit-ups, don't do planks, don't do anything that's going to work the abs. And it's like, okay, we need to unpick that a bit, because like, I think there's things that we can get fixated on that might have been appropriate for a very short period of time, a long time ago.
Right.
And it's finding out, as you say, you don't want to call it old wives' tales, but certainly the information around prolapse, for example. And that we now know that you can do this, and we take care with that,
Right. Yeah. No, and that's where, I mean, I feel completely lucky having kind of navigated this field while I was having kids and whatnot, because I think if I hadn't and not been aware of this information, like, I feel like I would be too afraid to do anything.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I feel like, our particular generation going into perimenopause and menopause, I really do feel like, we need a boot camp to get caught up on what's happened and all the changes. And when I tell other moms, our vintage, that I'm like, I see my new moms at about 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. And then I see them at 6 weeks. And then, we're screening for readiness to run and making a plan. And, and when I tell them that, they're like, well, we weren't supposed to do anything. I'm like, yeah I know. And especially C-section moms and, diastasis and all of that. And I feel like there's so much to catch up on and be like, you know what, you're fine. I absolve you. Like, like, it's because there's I've had patients before that they are literally like, their kids are teenagers and they still think that they cannot do abdominal exercises.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
How are you supposed to run without abs? Like, how are you supposed to do barbell without abs?
Well, this arm thing that you're doing when you're running along, and your legs and the connection between, do you think that the abs might need to?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I wonder, again, like, if you look at, that generation that's just like, hey, we're not running anymore. Are they breaking down sooner than they would have if they hadn't kind of, inadvertently been deconditioned? And I think a lot of those women, just got back and did the best they could with what they had. But like, did they break down sooner than they needed to because they didn't have, early rehab or any rehab to the abs or, strength training or something like that?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm hoping with our generation is like, okay, well, we got it better late than never. But I mean, I don't know that I only started lifting heavy. My youngest was 3. Just because it was like, I was starting to see patients, who were lifting, and I had hip labral surgery 18 years ago. And that was the one thing that all of a sudden, we talk about past injury, like, that's what allowed me to run pain-free again. So if it weren't for those things, I don't think I would have ever come across doing it. So I'm so thankful, like, for all the crap that I've had to go through. I'm like, no, I'm really happy about that, because that's what made me pick up a barbell.
Definitely silver linings. Yeah.
Yeah. For you, what made you, like, was there a transition point for you where you're like, I've always done strengthening, or, okay, I really need to double down now. I'm going into this time period. I need to do this.
So I think, I mean, I've always loved going to the gym, and I've actually always been a member of a gym since about 15, 16 years old. So I've always enjoyed it. When I was younger, though, I used to do a lot more classes,
Yep.
a lot of jogging on the treadmill, and I would say probably more endurance type training. So,
Yep.
lifting relatively lighter, but a lot. Okay. And through reading around, obviously, I discovered, other people's work on this, and worked out pretty quickly that in your 40s, if you're looking after your bone health, you actually need to, apply some fairly heavy resistance here and lift a bit heavier. But I also just found I wasn't getting the benefits from it anymore. I had to go heavier because I just wasn't getting that same. I mean, the research supports this, doesn't it? When you're younger, you can do that type of lighter training, and it's kind of okay. Yes, you'd probably be better off doing heavier strength stuff, but it's
you can
not
get away with it.
You can get away with it. Whereas, and I was just found that I wasn't getting away with it. But when I trained strong and trained heavy, performance-wise, I would be better. I would just feel better and stronger on a run. I would just be that little bit faster. I would just be able to get up that hill a little bit more easily. So I kind of made the correlation anecdotally. And then, of course, there was all the literature that well and truly supports that. So that's been my take. But I think I'm relatively fortunate in that I've prioritized the funds for a gym membership for a start. That's been a priority for me. And I enjoy it, and I'm not intimidated by it. But I tell you what, I like, even sometimes, even with all that history and my job and everything, I still sometimes go into the weights area of the gym and go, too many big men here. This is a bit nerve-wracking. They're all looking at me because I'm 5'2". I'm not big. I'm
tiny.
Big. Yeah. So you sort of have a double take, and you're like, no, it's okay. I'm all right being here. And if I feel like that, I cannot imagine what it must be like for women going there. So it's just another point that I think makes it's another barrier potentially as well.
I love that you said that, because lots of times people think that because we're in this space, we should feel completely confident about all of this stuff. And we don't. I mean, I was talking to a former coach of mine the other day. I go to it's a CrossFit style gym, but it's not an affiliate. And we'd had some coaching, and I wasn't getting a lot of cues, and I missed my former coach. And I said, hey, I wish I would get more cueing. And she's like, you're intimidating. I'm like, what do you mean I'm intimidating? She's like, no, people think you know what you're doing. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing in here. I'm asking you guys. Like, I need someone to tell me. But I learned from, people that are great coaches and great cuers. Like, I'm learning from you within my body. Like, I'm kind of a mess here. I'm trying to get this figured out. And I'll extrapolate that and move it forward. But we have our own things that we're trying to work out.
And also, just because I know what I want my hamstring and my leg to do, doesn't mean it's going to do it.
No. In my head,
I still need someone to sort of,
in my head, I'm doing what they tell me to do, but it's really not happening.
I know the feeling.
What's your go-to kind of gym program? It sounds like you go to sort of an open gym and do your own programming. Is that?
I do. I do pretty much. Yeah.
What does that look like?
So this morning I went to the gym and I did 3K on the treadmill just to start off, just to sort of gently get going. And not in the olden days, I would have done that fast. I would have been looking at my watch. That's the thing that I think has changed in my late 40s, and now I'm 51. I'm just there to get moving. I'm there to move. My priority is different. So I did that to warm up. And then I've got a slight, I have a bit of a weakness in my right glutes. It's long standing. And because I'm training for a 10K race at the moment, I need to get that working. So I did some CrossFit stuff where they've got like a nice split bit of foam that's quite high, and you're literally jumping over it and trying to get some abduction work basically. And then I got my resistance band out and did some crab walking. sideways again to try and get that deep glute activation. Then I did some box jumping because I enjoy it. And I did some free weight stuff with my arms, some deadlifts, but not too heavy because I just find that if I do too heavy, my right shoulder, which is a little bit dodgy, just gets a bit funny. So I did some work on that.
Yeah.
And for me, and then I finished off with a bit of gentle Pilates style work for my lower back, just some abdominals, some pelvic tilt work, some bridging with knee extensions, and then some stretching to finish off. So, but I mean, that's not a recipe of any type. That's just what my body needs at the moment based on few niggles and also the fact that I need to get I don't need to get faster, do I?
No, but you're training for something. Yeah.
So I want to get the maximal strength and performance, and also I want to just feel good afterwards and not be broken.
Right.
So that's my main motivation is just, and I would say so I don't tire myself out to the absolute max every session.
Right.
I do 2 or 3 sessions a week where I will be pushing myself.
Right.
So, whereas I would say when I was younger and had a bit more time, I would, do more sessions. And some of them I'd be really pushing with, some I wouldn't. So, so I think it's quality these days.
Yeah. But I think, you hit a bunch of boxes that I think for someone who is training for something and you have, you want to get faster and that's a goal. I also love that you have the impact in there. And I feel like that's something that I'm including far earlier with my postpartum moms, and then really making sure is a part of a menopause training program, because I feel like it got left behind. And now they're saying, okay, do your, you've got to do this amount of jumping to help with your bone and tendon health. But if you never got that rehabbed in postpartum, you've probably been avoiding it because of kind of residual pelvic floor issues.
Absolutely. And confidence as well. Like,
right.
I don't know about you as a clinician, but, when you're assessing, you just say to someone, right now, they might come in with knee pain or hip pain. And you're like, right, now I need you to jump. Can you hop? And they're like, you can see on their faces, like, hopping.
Oh, yeah.
Not sure I can do that. Like,
and
sometimes they can. It's just confidence. Like, they just don't do it.
Yeah. But that's,
So,
I think, a qualitative thing that I do think kind of, if you watch certain recreational runners, they never got that like lightness or quickness back after having kids. And it was very kind of plodding and kind of like thick. And I feel like that's something that, can we find that lightness and brightness? We want to feel like a gazelle. We want to feel quick. And if you include that impact stuff, I think that's a great way to do it.
No, it's just absolutely essential. And also just digging around the studies, there was a big Scandinavian study done, a Finnish study, looking at women pre, peri, and post menopause. And they looked at things like grip strength, vertical jump height, and so on. Knee extensor strength. And basically they found that your vertical jump height, your ability to do that jumping high, reduced alongside, you're probably very familiar with this, alongside their perimenopausal status independent of their age, which I think is fascinating, because you just think, oh, well, you're getting older, you're not going to be able to bound up the stairs the same way. But actually, there's a link there, which means that at this age, yes, we must train it.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, we're looking at these assumptions of, is this perimenopause? Is this stuff just because I'm getting older? Like, what are things that we or previous generations just accepted that we're looking at and reanalyzing and saying, well, is this something that I can train or just something that is just going to happen? And I like that we're rethinking it. And, I don't know, even just thinking back, my mom went to the gym, I think, before work so this was been like the 90s, and I, was off to college and that sort of thing. And that to me was revolutionary, that she would go to the gym before work. And But now, like, I just, I walked over to the office here the other day and there was a mom, pushing a stroller around the gym. Like that's very kind of normal now. And it's
Mm.
just so cool to see that these kind of ideas and norms have really just shifted in a very short period of time. Have you seen that sort of parallel kind of where you are?
Oh, definitely. Like I think culturally, it's definitely. I mean, it's difficult for us as well because we are in the health bubble. So,
Right.
you know, obvious, and we're treating active populations.
Yep.
So perhaps if I worked in a different area, I would think differently. But
Yeah.
even within that, when I was younger and I would go to the gym, there just weren't so many people
Right.
like myself there. Whereas now, as you say, it's all about young families being in that
Yep.
active space as it should be,
Yeah.
and that's sort of, actually as a family we will go to the gym and do stuff. The kids might be in the pool or on the tennis
Hmm.
court or in the gym. Like, I don't think that's becoming, culturally that's much more
Yeah.
normal than it would have been. Whereas, when we were younger, sadly less so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
No,
It's,
I think
it's,
so
it's,
too.
it's interesting. And I think the more that the culture can support an active lifestyle, the more likely we are to do it. We
Yeah.
take our cultural cues and what's permissible and what, from external cues, don't we? So, yeah,
Yeah.
it helps.
And for me too, just thinking, I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural area in New York State, and you had to go somewhere to exercise, and there just
Mhm.
weren't gyms. Or, I mean, you're not going to run down the road. You're going to
Yeah.
go find a trail or something like that. Whereas here, I can just, go right out my door to, I can walk to a gym. I can, go down the sidewalk, that kind of stuff. I do think
Mm.
accessibility and infrastructure and all that
Oh,
stuff
totally.
definitely is more supportive,
Mm.
or at least where we are.
Yeah.
What about if you have so like two questions, one kind of going in one direction, one in the other. If
Mm.
you have a mom that comes to you and let's say they historically were a runner, they've kind of run off and on recreationally, their kids are getting grown, and they really want to get back to it again for a couple
Yes.
of reasons. One, that, they want to find that identity again.
Mm.
But also the second one is kind of previously in their 20s and 30s, they might have used that for weight management.
Mhm.
One, how do you get them started on kind of a return to run? I don't want to
Mhm.
say in later life because I don't
Mhm.
like that. And then two, how do you have that conversation about differing expectations, you know, of the benefits and the outcomes of running in one phase of life versus another?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And this is what we see, isn't it? This is our generation of women. We see
Yes.
this. So first of all, finding out how much cardiovascular fitness work they've done, if any,
Hmm.
and if they've that's kind of fallen away, that's okay. We can start where they are. Um, so walking, a little bit of walking and a little bit of running together. And it might be as simple as, some people like that to be quite recipe based, almost
Hmm.
like, walk for a minute, run for a minute, and we'll write that
Right.
out and say, or they might run for 5 minutes, walk for 5 minutes. So some people will want that level of um, dictated to them.
Yep.
Others will be a bit more going with the feel. Some people love apps. Personally, I would struggle with running with an app, but some people love the Couch to
Some
5K.
people,
Yep,
yeah. Or I have a
yep,
lot of women that do the Peloton treadmill
yes,
programming,
yep, yep.
which I hate the treadmill, so I
Yeah,
wouldn't do it
yeah.
well.
Not that much fun, is it? Let's face it. It's a bit of a needs must. But so yeah, it's finding out what they like with regards to that and meeting them
Hmm.
where they are. I was involved in the UK. There's a program called This Mum Runs that's just been renamed actually
Yeah.
to This Woman Runs, but they have what they called a Run 30 app. And they made it, rather than making it distance, they deliberately chose the 30-minute mark,
Yeah.
because that takes the pressure off, doesn't it? And I was
Right.
involved in the development of that app. And again, that's another app that's available. This Mum Runs. It may have been renamed to This Woman Runs.
Hmm.
Or it's just called the Run 30 app. So
Yep.
some people really like those apps. And then, of
Hmm.
course, within them, they will get that extra help. So there might be a little bit on pelvic floor, for example, or someone talking to them about, what to do if they get a niggle. So there's that aspect of it. So it depends, but I would say, start slow and if they haven't run much for a while, keeping it pretty flat to begin with, because
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty hilly where we live actually. And, you just don't want to introduce too many elements.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no rules exactly, are there, about how quickly to progress, but, try to not increase your distance by 10%, more than 10% a week.
Hmm.
And don't increase your speed, your gradient, and your
Right.
distance all at the same time, because that's what happens, isn't it? People get a little bit confident and think, oh, well, I might just go a bit further today. I'm feeling really good. Oh, and there's a hill. I'll go there, and I'm getting faster. And then that's where the injuries happen. So
Yeah.
just being mindful. I guess as physios, we're very used to putting the reins on people a tiny bit, like pushing them, and then like just gently nudging back. So it's a bit of a push-pull process.
Yeah.
And some people like accountability. So I'm happy for them to email me and tell me how they're getting on, or obviously come back and see me and do that. So that's the first part of that question. The second bit is absolutely true. Many women will run as a form of weight management because it's effective when you're younger.
Dot.
But again, it's quite interesting. I've done a bit, and this is sort of going off piste a little bit from the physio stuff, but I've done a bit of research around this, and I work quite closely with some dietitians and nutritionists in the perimenopause space. And so what we do know is that as we enter perimenopause, potentially our ability to regulate our blood glucose can change. So we may be more susceptible to, some of these metabolic changes, meaning that tissues aren't uptaking the energy quite so well. And women may be more predisposed to changes in where they store their fat. Yep. So they may tend to store it more around the middle, as opposed to, when they're younger, store it on the thighs, on the hips, and so on. Mm-hmm. So sadly, that is what happens when the estrogen drops off. It is a real thing. It's not just in our imagination. That said, there's no need to say, oh, going through perimenopause, I'm getting older, therefore I naturally have to lose, I will put on weight, and that's the end of the story, because it doesn't have to be that way. And of course, as we get older, our metabolism slows a bit. So there are those things. And I think when women know that, well, this is real, this is physiological, this is more likely to be the case. However, so, that sets the expectation a little bit of the results might not be as quick, and they might not come as fast. Or they might not come, but I'll still be healthier. So it might be for some women that they don't end up losing, a particular amount of weight, but their muscle to fat ratio will probably improve because they're more active, and therefore they'll be burning the calories more effectively. Because of that. And in terms of their longer term health, so for example, their waist to hip ratio, what's going on there, because that's one of the markers of health that you'd be looking at. So getting them to think more, rather than looking at the scales, or perhaps not looking at the scales at all, actually thinking, what is, where am I waist to hip ratio? How am I feeling? Am I feeling well in myself? What is my metabolic health status? And thinking about it more from a health perspective. And that's total mind shift for women.
It is.
That's a totally different mind shift. And then I don't want to say an acceptance, because, you don't want it to be inevitable by any stretch, but also thinking, well, things are different now. And also, I would say, if people are, concerned about that, I work quite closely with a dietitian and nutritionist called Laura Clark, and she and I have done a lot of work together. And she's online at menopause.dietitian. But basically, you want to find a really credible dietitian or nutritionist. I'm sure there's tons of similar people in the States, and start reading their work, start going on their website. They'll have a lot available for free on their blogs and things. So you can understand and set your expectations and support yourself nutritionally. Because the other thing, I think we all, I know I've been guilty of this. When I was younger, you go for a run, you come home, you have a cup of coffee and maybe a grape, and then you go off to work, and that's it. The body just does not like that. And it especially doesn't like it in perimenopause, and it won't help you lose weight. So I think a lot of these old bad habits, actually eating something in the first half an hour post-exercise will actually help support your metabolism, and might mean that you actually do lose a bit of weight because you're more effective. So thinking about it differently. Yeah.
No, I love that you brought up a mindset shift and a dietitian, because I think
Mm.
if you are really looking at trying to do body composition changes, weight loss, and DIY it, it's very, very hard
Oh,
in the
yeah.
perimenopause time. Like, I mean, just with the amount of knowledge that I have, still trying to navigate it, the middle is
Mm.
like, it's not easy. And so but I think like laying things out and being honest and aware of what habits that you have and stuff that we pulled from these assumptions about our 20s, and just understanding
Mhm.
that no, the rules are different. You can't, you know, you can't just eat, like you said, like coffee and a grape and like call it a day. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't cut it.
No, and your body will tell, your mind will tell you that as well, won't it? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, even recovery too, like if you're not eating much before or after. I mean, I find
Mm.
that now that now that I fuel during runs, like that's
Yeah.
completely different. But again, it's adopting this different mindset, and
Mm.
knowing that, we can't DIY it the way that we did in our 20s, where
No.
you run as hard and fast as you can, you work out as hard as fast as you can, you eat as little as possible, and then magic happens. Like, this is just not how it
Mm.
works. And you need somebody that can
Sorry.
sit down with you and help figure out those parts and pieces
Yeah.
objectively, because we all have our feelings too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
about what if somebody comes to you and they've been diving through the internet, and there's weird stuff floating around about, no, you shouldn't do zone 2 running. It's bad
Mm.
for
Yeah.
perimenopause, or should I
Yeah.
stop running because it's bad for my, like, anything that's telling you stop running, you shouldn't be doing it now, it's bad for you. Like, how do you have that conversation with somebody?
Yeah. I mean, so y- I tend to, I've sort of broken this down into different levels. So when I do my sort of strengthening perimenopause classes, master classes, or my perimenopause in running classes, I present a model to people about and ask them to think about where they're at. So level 1 would be someone who's relatively sedentary, doesn't do much, and is just finding their way into movement.
Yeah.
So maybe it hasn't done a high impact stuff for years. So that would be level 1. Level 2 would be they've started to be a bit active, and they've started to realize that they need to do a little bit more or want to do a bit more. Then level 3 would be people who, and I would probably call myself this, someone who's always been pretty active, doing quite a bit, but wants to do it really, really well,
Yeah.
incredibly. And then level 4 would be literally people who have competed at national, international level, regional level, really competitive, perhaps still doing master's level stuff, or doing marathons with good for age times, and getting top 10 finishes and things like that on a marathon. So that's like your level 4. Right?
Yeah.
So I tend to break it down into those broad categories, and people can shift between them, obviously. And then I think for people who are in this level 1 and level 2, I do give them the reassurance that, yes, there's a lot out there that if you're not lifting heavy, it's not doing good. And if you're not in zone 3, then it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, you've got to be able to lay the foundations so that your body can take that first.
Yep.
So, and because I present it in kind of like a sort of a pyramidal, it's not quite pyramidal, but like a 1, 2, 3, 4 stage thing. So where one layer builds on the layer below, it kind of fits with that philosophy. So that's how I tend to talk to people about it. And I think it's meeting people where they're at right now. Yeah. Because yes, obviously, brief high intensity activity, we know that gives the greatest result, that gives you the greatest bang for your buck, for sure. Mm-hmm. But actually, if you're not really confident with being able to jump on the spot and run on the spot, and you're not done much for a while, your bones and joints are going to need, and we know this as physios, of course, they're going to need a little bit of work before you get there. So it's giving them, and then of course giving them the tools and the strength to do that. So I think, and I think you just we don't want to set the bar so high that people get let down, but equally we want to always think progression.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and I like that, because I think we kind of got stuck again, going back to,
Mm.
we went through in postpartum is we were given that kind of initial, this is what you do immediately. And then a lot of women got stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
there was no way, and we didn't even really have a great way to bridge the gap between like
No.
mat exercises and running. We didn't have any
Mm.
sort of way to do that. And that's why I so appreciate Tom Goom's work and, collaborating with people like you and Grania and
Mm.
Emma, and just saying, well, okay, well, can we start to fill in this gap a little bit? I feel like the
Yeah.
gap is here too. Like we need to reach back and say, okay, let's find our foundation here, but please don't get stuck. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get stuck here. We need to let's see where we can go with this.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really excited to see with our generation is like, how far can we go with this? Like, that's what I love lifting is I'm still learning stuff all the
That's it.
time. I'm still lifting a little bit higher with certain lifts and things like that. And then there's other lifts where I'm like, you know what? I been there, done that. I don't need to max out. I just want to work on my technique or things like that. But I think
Mm.
changing that idea and that mindset of this is a progression. We're going to start with this foundation. It's okay to do zone 2 because we just want to get
Mm.
you started.
Mm.
But then, we don't, there's no good or bad. It's like, well, let's get you moving first,
Yeah, yeah. And also adding in those little periods of high intensity as well, even if
Yeah,
they might
not
have
being
1 or 2
scared of it.
minutes to
Yeah.
start of it. So
Yeah.
it might be that, so say it was running,
Mhm.
you might be running along the flat, being in zone 2, walk running, but
Yep.
then you do add in that little bit of an
Yeah.
incline. So you are getting your heart rate up that bit
Yep.
more, but only for a brief period. And then
Yep.
you bring it down again so that you're building in
Mhm.
gradual all the time. But there's a room for progression for sure.
Yeah. No, I definitely went through a period where I was just, I would just go out for sanity runs and
Mm.
things like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And then started, I think it was a couple years ago, started working with a local coach and she just, would program intervals in.
Mm.
And it was just a nice mental break, but it makes you faster. It
Definitely.
introduces that new stimulus. Like there were so many good things about it. So now when I'm looking at, even if you're not training for something, like, yeah, is there a place in your just sanity runs that we can throw in, some interval work? Because there's a lot of good things that can come from that. You don't
Mm.
necessarily have to be training for a race to introduce that stimulus. But people just aren't used to kind of thinking that way, especially if they haven't worked with a coach or a trainer or somebody that's kind of introduced that concept.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, with running, unless you've sort of really sat down and read about it or been to
Right.
workshops or had the input of coaches, you might not be thinking about all these other
Mhm.
things like the threshold running or the
Yep.
intervals and all that. And something that I tend to do myself and have introduced to people a bit is the off-road running for balance and coordination, which
Yeah.
again, we know as we get older is such an important component.
Yeah.
And it just gets you outside a bit more, basically.
Yeah.
Gets you going to different places rather than the same run around.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did my first trail run. I did a 15K trail run last year.
Great.
And
Yeah.
man, that humbled me.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a lot of vertical, and my poor little quads were just trembling by the end. And I was very aware of a lot of deficits on that one.
Yeah, finds you out. Definitely finds you out.
Yeah, in your head, because I did cross country running in high school, and in my head, I'm like, oh, this is great, and my body's like,
Yeah.
you are not in that shape. You need to do additional things if this is something you want to keep doing.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a great challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so at the end of every episode, we ask a couple of questions. So first one, what's a book you're reading or a podcast that you're listening to right now?
Well, podcast I'm listening to actually is I'm looking at doing more writing. So
Mm.
there's a lady who I've done some writing coaching with
Mhm.
called Penny Windsor. So I've been listening to her podcast a little bit as well. And then I've got on my list of things to do after this a webinar that's just come into me from an organization over here called This Girl Can. I don't know if they've got a similar organization over there, but basically it's a big organization in the UK, which is all about enabling women to be part of physical activity, because I work quite closely in the running community, but also in the tennis community, trying to get girls very active. So I've got that on my list. And in terms of books, I do absolutely love reading, and I'm just in between books at the moment, and I've just finished reading a parenting book about parenting my teenage daughter.
How old is your daughter?
She's 13, and I also have a
Okay.
son who's 15.
Okay. What did you learn? Because my son is 14 and my daughter's 11, so I will take all of your tips.
Yeah. This book's called Mum, What's Wrong with You?
Oh, God.
And it's basically a bit of a laugh, really. I mean, it's written by a woman called Lorraine Candy, and it's about the fact that, I mean, they're so full of joy, aren't they, teenagers? But also they do go through this whole need to separate themselves, and how we can best help facilitate them during this period and give them the privacy and space they need.
Yeah.
Also, their as well as that, give them the support they need without being a helicopter parent.
Yes.
Crowding them out. So yes, it's a real challenge.
It's a totally different skill set than raising an early kid.
Well, totally.
I find that it's more mentally challenging to come home, but again, you don't know what's coming home at the end of the day.
No, that's right. And I think as well, you don't know which version is coming in the next 5 minutes. And also screen time is a big thing. I'm assuming the screen time debate is pretty big in the States. Certainly a big thing here. So it was a little, I just feel like managing that, managing screens and teenagers, which is a pretty hot topic right now. So yes.
No, I've had to navigate. I have one child that is a mini me, and then I have another child that we are working on establishing good study habits and prioritization, and I'm his study buddy, and so coming home from work, I just want to crash out, and instead we're studying for world geography. So. Yeah. I still don't know all the countries in Africa, and I got to learn that by Friday. So.
Brilliant. I love it. So so that's, I mean, I do love reading some novels as well. I'm just about to start one called H is for Hawk, which is supposed to be brilliant. I've had recommended to me. So I usually do a self-help learning one, then a novel, then go between.
Yes, no, I'm the same way. And I love that you're kind of trying to understand writing too. My dad was an English teacher for 35 years in journalism and creative writing. So we spent my childhood summers, finding Robert Frost's original books and Emerson and Thoreau and things like that. So that's very much one of my love languages, is being able to speak and use your words to, say something. So love that.
Hence your podcasting and your natural abilities in this field as well.
It's nice to be able to use that creative side to kind of, I don't know, it's just fun to be able to use the creative side of yourself and put it together with the science. So yeah. All right. Amazing. What is your favorite activity since becoming a mom? And it doesn't have to always do with your kids either. My kids are in some ways similar to me, in some ways a little bit different, of course, like you were sort of saying. And my kids both love sport, love being active. My daughter plays a lot of tennis. My son does quite a bit of football. So I think one thing I've really loved is just not cheering from the sidelines or being in fact, with the tennis especially, it's very much about maintaining an absolute poker face. Because they look at you for a reaction and things. So very much, but just watching them develop and learn, and the highs and lows, trying not to ride those highs and lows too heavily, and just watching just Cade level. But I've loved that aspect, and I think you find your people as well. So being an Aussie over here, pre-kids, yes, I've met people, but you don't have as much in common. But when you're a mum of kids, of course, you meet other like-minded women, don't you? And you get to form friendships. And now we've got families that we're friends with, that are, the kids are friends, but the adults are friends. And when we have gatherings with them, I think that's been a great thing. Yeah, and something a bit different. So that's been really good, especially because my natural friend network from when I grew up is obviously not here. And I suppose a lot of people don't live where they grew up. So, yeah.
So
Right.
that's probably been the favorite things for me.
Yeah, I've found too, in the US, I don't know if the UK is like this. There's a whole side business of travel sports and things like that. And so we're very like everybody is like if you're not doing a sport, all year round by age of 6 or, whatever. And what we
Yeah.
know obviously from the literature is, that's going to lead to burnout and injury and all these
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah.
So knowing that, feeling the pressure, and then also still finding families that align with what you're thinking, we finally have fallen into a group of softball families that all the other ones are off doing travel and we're just with the
Yeah.
rec parents, and it's so much more chill and it's so much more fun and the kids are having a blast. So it's nice to still find new friends.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's the same over here in
Yeah.
the Tasmania,
Okay.
like
Okay.
exactly the same. You can be jetting off here, there, and everywhere, and there's social
Right.
pressures to do that. But
Yeah.
actually, we know that diversifying the sport, making
Yes.
sure you're doing a broad range of things is going to be better
Yeah.
for your joints, better for your
Yep.
burnout risk. And finding people who are on your wavelength
Yes.
is great. Yeah,
Yep.
it's very reassuring and a great part of being a parent, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's been a nice recent event this year, actually in the last
Sounds
couple of
good.
weeks. So I've
Sounds
been
good,
really
yeah.
happy to find that.
I bet, because I think otherwise it can be high pressure and
Hmm.
intense
Yep.
and yeah, you got to find your people. And I think you've got to remember that a lot of this stuff is driven by the push to get you
Yep.
to do everything. That's a lot of commercial pressure.
It's
Is
somebody's
yeah,
business plan. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Don't forget that. Don't
yeah.
forget that. All right. What's one piece of advice for perimenopausal moms?
Well, naturally, as a physio, I'm thinking about strength really,
Yeah.
but also not forgetting. So I am all about strength for sure, but not forgetting that this is a really busy time of life for
Yeah.
most of us, isn't it? Sandwich generation between
Yep.
parents,
Mm.
kids, juggling a lot of things. You're talking about, kids' activities, your activities, supporting them. So sometimes meditative exercise also has a place. And I know we haven't talked about that today, and that's where I think that zone 2 stuff, or just your sanity,
Yep.
you called it your sanity run, you know, have something for your sanity as well. And I love that you asked about books as well. That can be a place of sanity for
Yep.
me, for sure. So it's, yes, do the strength work and do try and aim for progression, but do also have something in your schedule that is a little bit more meditative, that grounds you.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Before kids, I spent, oh gosh, probably like 10 years studying more mindfulness sorts of things and was really good about it. Probably even the last, well, maybe like the first 3 years, kind of after COVID, and really have not done as well the last couple of years. Things are a little stressful over here in the States right now, and I feel the need to okay, we need to go back and recommit to that.
Yeah.
Especially with a kid going into high school next year. I'm like, okay, we need to calm the nervous system. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all about getting the weights out, as we've talked about, but things like yoga and Pilates can be quite useful to ground you. Other forms of creativity.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, the world's an evolving place at the moment, isn't it?
Yes.
Things are changing. So I think something that can take us out of what's going on in the news and is useful. Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. All right. Who is somebody either in the peri or menopause space or running that we should know about? Like, who's got your attention right now?
You've mentioned one of my favorites, which is Tom Groom, of course. If you're into your running and you're a physio or you're a clinician or you're a runner who's just a bit nerdy about it all and wants to know stuff, go and have a look at Tom's stuff. Running Physio, is his byline, and he's brilliant.
Yes.
I mentioned my colleague and friend Laura Clark, who's at menopause.dietitian. If you want to know a little bit about or more than a little bit, if you want to, know the nuts and bolts of nutrition in that time, but also how to take care of yourself in a kind and empathetic way.
Yep.
If you're trying to manage your weight and also your family's health. She's brilliant. And of course, I mean, you would have, being from the States, you guys would have come across Stacey Sims quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Find her work quite interesting. So there's some people that I think are of interest at the moment that I would say in the perimenopausal and running space that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And have a good look at. Yeah.
I'm such a fan of paying attention to just sports ortho, running, physios in general, because I think they have some of the bare bones of what we need to pull over into what we do. And again, so much respect for Tom to recognize this as an area to pay attention to. Some other ones that we've actually had on the podcast, Chris Johnson and Rich Willie over here in the States are wonderful. And again, I think we're having more conversations about masters runners.
Yes.
And so as we have those parallel conversations, we need to pull in this, side conversation of what's happening, with musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause and, what questions do we need to be asking? And it's just another great opportunity to collaborate with our sports and orthopedic colleagues, or if you have interest that yourself, pull all that stuff in. So again, it's to go full circle. It's very much, I think, just the next version of what we had to do, kind of navigating pregnancy and postpartum. So it's fun. We've done it before. We can do this, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's fascinating that you use the term musculoskeletal syndrome of the menopause, because that's an emerging term, isn't it? That isn't, I said it to somebody the other day and they're like, what? Like,
yeah.
What do you actually mean? And they were curious about it.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think that's something that hopefully ongoing research will help us understand, because that terminology is starting to come into usage.
Yes. Yeah. Well, even just people acknowledging that frozen shoulder in their 40s, that's not just an overuse injury. Like that's going to be related to these changes. And I distinctly remember my mom going through it. And I remember saying to her, oh, that's just something that happens, not putting together that, by the way, you're also in this, right? Exactly. Yeah. Like we understood it, but now we really are like, oh no, X and Y is this. So yeah, for sure. All right. And then last question, what does it mean to you to be an active mom?
Well, I think, our kids are always watching, aren't they? The good and the bad. And I think if you're an active mom, it's a good example to kids, and you can do things together. So just enables you to get out and about and on holiday doing more fun, some really fun things. So I think that's what it means to me. It's shared experience, really, is what I would say. Yeah. And I think it's just in me to be that way, really. I think it just means that you share more with your family, and my husband's relatively active as well, so it just means a family you can do more things and hopefully keep going for longer,
right? That's the plan, right? That is the plan. Yeah, no, I love that. When we see my parents, my dad's not able to be active anymore as much with Parkinson's, but my mom's still like, if she doesn't get out for her walk or her run, all right, it's in my gene pool. This is just something that we need to do. So absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I love that. All right. If you want to learn more about Claire, you can find her Physio Claire Cal on Instagram, and you can reach out there and check out her blog with Tom Goom. You can just Google her name and Tom Goom's name, and that comes right up. And Claire, thanks so much for joining me and, taking the invitation and the time to just chat with us and talk about perimenopause and menopause. Yeah, it's a really great chat. Lots of parallels. That's amazing, isn't it? I know. I love it. Continents, but actually so much in common. And so I love that. In common. Me too. Love it. So, well, thanks so much for being on. Yeah, take care. Thanks so much. Bye, Carrie. If you're navigating pregnancy, postpartum, or perimenopause, whether personally or professionally, check out all our free resources and upcoming courses at carriepagliano.com. This podcast reflects the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests, and it is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider with any medical questions. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And thanks for listening.